Welcome, heathens and witches, to the Horn
and Cauldron
Podcast. Pub Chat Edition. Not because of the drinking, but it helps. So I'm John Norgrove. This is Julie Norgrove. This is your When It Comes Out, Shut Up podcast. And today's a pub chat. Yay! That means that there's not a script and we don't really know what we're doing, and Jonathan's mostly gonna just like wax. I'm gonna use the term poetically, but it may be idiotically. We'll see what happens. Yeah, so
it's something.
So on the podcasts, we do research, or Julie does research. I don't do anything. Julie does research, and we're all prepared and stuff. And on the off podcasts, it's mostly just topical questions from you guys out there, or from our patrons. Shout out to them, and you can join that. Wait until the end. We'll talk about it. Or stuff that we just thought about or had a long car ride conversation about because we watched a movie and it changed our minds about things a little bit. I'm looking at you, Santa Claus stuff. So, yeah. I believe... Oh, before we get into what the question is, today we are drinking Corbel's...
Prestige Cuvée.
Prestige Cuvée. So, shout out to Corbel. Like, we're not associated with these guys. We bought this with money. But
with our money.
With our money, yeah. But this stuff's good, so if you like champagne, give it a try.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay, so if I remember correctly, which I maybe.
We'll find out.
This is a patron question.
Yes.
Okay, so what's the patron question?
So,
or topic of conversation.
I'm going to say recently in air quotes because it has not been nearly as recent as it should have been.
But that's okay. This has been a lot.
Yeah.
Right? So, shush. With that.
Y'all, I just had a root canal done. Give me some grace.
Yeah. Shush with that, and then we're going to just pretend shut up.
Yeah. So we had a patron ask us if back in ancient times, or like ye old times, if people worshipped gods from different pantheons concurrently. So like, for instance, in ancient times, if you would you have been able to, or would in general people have worshipped, say, like gods from the Norse pantheon, like Thor, or Odin, or Freya, alongside deities from, like, say, the Greek or Roman pantheon, like Janus or Zeus or Ares or any of those.
Okay.
So I actually thought, not only did I answer their question already, so like, yeah, you've already got your answer, but now you get like a whole dedicated answer, as well as like a good conversation, like and vibes. Yeah, and I thought this was a really interesting question because,
vibes, if you will.
What kind of vibes?
Con vibes. It's like Con Air, the movie, not the product company. Isn't Con Air like a brand of hair product company?
Yes.
Okay, I'm talking about the Sweet movie.
You're talking about the Nicolas Cage, not the hairdryer.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. Better movie than a hairdryer.
I don't know.
I don't either.
No, I do know.
I've never used
Con Air is a pretty hairdryer.
What do I look like? A responsible adult who takes care of his hair? No.
You know what? I don't really do hairdryers either.
That's not what this is. This just happens until I get tired of it happening, and then I have somebody cut it off. Or I cut it off myself because it's not that difficult.
Yeah, I don't really do a hairdryer. And in the rare occasion that I do blow dry my hair, I'm always like, what's this hair?
It's just a series. It's just a series of crazy straws, like docked into each other, so you can go, and it just blows the hair.
I mean, that
just
exists
like this.
too. But no, I have like literally the cheapest hairdryer that you can buy because I use it.
I don't even know that we have a hairdryer in this house. Really?
Yes. The only reason that we still own it is because if we needed a hairdryer for something, like for instance, the dogs.
Oh, sure. I have a heat gun? Is that kind of the same thing?
If we don't have a hairdryer, we're going to want to use a heat gun.
You can't use the heat gun.
No!
I think it's way too hot. Also, It sounds like two airplanes scraping against each other mid-flight. It is such a loud heat gun. But it's old, so that's to be expected.
It
just screams while it heats.
Yeah, it's also an old hairdryer, but whatever.
Yeah.
Anyways, I thought this was a really cool question because
this is a great question. Comment below. Do you use a hairdryer? It's not important, but comment below. So okay. I think that firstly we need to sort of address the like linguistic elephant in the room, which is two separate people in two separate places around the world worshiping in temporal simultaneity and /or, because we're going to have two separate conversations here, one specific person worshiping two deities from two separate pantheons at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? Whether or not it's like Tuesdays is Zeus days and Wednesdays is Thor days, that's not really important.
Mm-hmm.
But I think those are two distinctly separate questions that require two distinctly separate conversations. So we're going to start with the easy one, right?
Actually, I'll answer both right now. Yes and yes. Podcast done.
Yeah, get out of here.
Good night.
Go home. No, okay, so if, like, let's say 47 BCE.
Yeah.
All right. Were some people in the north worshiping Thor and some people in the south worshiping Zeus? Of course they were. Of course they were.
Yes.
Right? And there were some people in the Americas doing whatever worship they're doing in the Americas. And there were some people in Southeast Asia doing whatever worship was in Southeast Asia and in Africa. And you know, in like the native people of the Tyga and Euphrates River. And, you know, the Inuits of like North America, right? And things like that. So like, obviously, and I mean like I don't mean obviously in like a sassy way, but like, in general, I think that the way that we talk about these things is primarily, because this is America, from like a Western European bend, right? So we go like real fine detail on Western Europe. And then like the unit in world history on Africa, or the unit in world history on like China or South America is like, some people were there 600 years later, some more people were there 600 years later, white people came in and fucked shit up. Or whatever, right? So like, we kind of don't get that same granularity, which I think affects the way that we sort of think about these things, right? As well as because of the way that we educate on, like, this is the, like, Greek unit, and then this is the German unit, and then this is the English unit, or the Roman unit, or whatever. We kind of bifurcate things by like social locality and not purely just by time. So like, for sure there is a ton of overlap disparately across the world. Now, slightly more fine edge on that question, right, is like, were Norse pagans concurrently worshiping in, you know, the Seven Sisters at the same time that like the Greeks were worshiping, like in like, you know, Greece and stuff?
Yes.
Right? Like, for sure, yes. I think. For sure, yes.
Yes, for sure, yes, because we have like
the dates.
We have
stuff.
We have like proof.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's what I'm saying. There's
stuff,
like
right?
There's like rocks with like stuff carved in it, and like fucking carbon dating and shit.
The yes is like an asterisk also, because while we have a lot of information about like when the Greeks or the Romans started worshiping someone, or like the Egyptians, we have a lot less data available for Germanic and like Celtic practices because they were primarily oral practices. Nice. As opposed to oral and written practices, also
gently
nice.
Less nice.
No, also nice.
Oh, now sure,
double dipping. Right?
Sure.
So like
the pen is mightier than the
so
sword.
like we know based on information from like ancient Roman travel bloggers, basically, that like people were in fact worshiping gods that were like sort of Greek or Roman in origin further north. And also
my cell phone's being used.
Yeah,
I was gonna look up exactly when Ibn Fadlan traveled up to see, because I think there's like a hard date on that, but like, okay, so like basically what she's saying is that like there's sort of like half of our history, real hard facts, half of the conversation, real hard facts, and I know that we're doing like Greek and Norse, and that's primarily because those are the things that we know most about, right? But to that extent, I think that, like, from my perspective, the most reasonable evidentiary conversation you can have about things is that, like, the Romans built Hadrian's Wall in separating England and Scotland, right? Because when they crossed into Scotland, they had to deal with, like, the Celts and the Picts, who were, like, you know, terrifying monster people to them because they pushed the Romans back, because the Romans were trying to, like, take over their shit, and they were like, not here, bro. So, like, we know that while the Romans worshipped the way that the Romans did, the Celts and the Picts were worshipping the way that they did historically, primarily because these two cultures directly bounced off each other, right? One preserved, the other, very scared, built a wall, guard that wall. We've all seen that terrible Arthur movie.
Yeah, well,
that has something to do with Romans.
In addition to that, whenever the Romans went a-conquerin', or an explorin', as a preface to a-conquerin', as they were wont to do, they would basically go in and be like, oh, you worship, like, this deity that's associated with, like, horses and the sun and is kind of like a hot twink. Like, we have that. Come to find out, we have that too.
Listen, it's the same guy.
Too. We call him Apollo. Yeah. What do you call him?
Well, it's a lot of, like, in your language, you call him whatever your name is, and in our language, we call him whatever our name is. But it's like the same guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
So that was, like, definitely their MO with a lot of this stuff. So they did definitely do that.
Clearly, they gave the church the idea.
Yeah. And Ibn Fadlan traveled to actually Russia is where he traveled to, the Volga region in Russia. In, like, AD 921.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because a lot of the actual, like, historical records that we have are basically, like, not only by him, but by people talking about, like, making stories and sort of like poems and heraldic songs about different rulers in that area. And we see a lot of that starting around like AD 700 going all the way like up until like the 1700s.
Yeah.
So we kind of have this like weird time gap of things where we kind of have to infer a lot of information about Norse particularly because we don't, because again, an oral tradition. So like we have information from when the Romans were going a-conquerin', which is sort of like between like BCE 300 all the way up to like the year 300. So like we're looking at like a fairly long amount of time that they were going a-conquering, but we also don't have kind of anything in between those times other than like sort of chance accounts and things like that. Because while the Romans did write a lot of stuff down, we just don't have, you know, a lot of that stuff didn't survive. And also not everybody had access to writing tools. It's not like you just like open up your notes app. You don't just like, I mean, you don't just like pull out your wax tablet, I but think, like some people did, right?
I think an easy way to sort of think about this is that like, while the Romans were doing whatever the Romans were doing, like the Egyptians were doing whatever the Egyptians were doing worship-wise. And those were distinct and separate whilst happening simultaneously because like, you know, like Roman motherfuckers knew Cleopatra and shit.
Except that they weren't distinct and separate because we have a lot of evidence for a lot of deities.
No, hold on. What I specifically mean by distinct and separate is that the Romans were worshiping Roman gods, and the Egyptians were worshiping Egyptian gods, insofar as there was blending, which is the reason why I brought this up, is because this is the easiest transition into the second way to interpret the question. Well, which is which is specifically, was one person worshiping gods from two different pantheons. And of course, right, this also works off the caveat that like if you're worshiping the Egyptian equivalent of Apollo, right, and the Greeks show up, or the Romans show up, or the Greeks show up, and they go like, listen, we already got this guy, his name is Apollo, and now you're using the word Apollo to worship him. Is that the same thing, distinctly, as worshiping Greek Apollo and Egyptian Apollo? Like, Egyptian Apollo equivalent. And I would argue yes and no. Yes, it's the same thing because you're worshiping the same iconographic ideology. all right? But no, because you reached that location from two different directions. It's like going into your kitchen. Can you go, like our kitchen has a back door and then like a hallway area to get into from the living room. So like if you enter the kitchen from the back door or you enter the kitchen from the living room, you're still in the kitchen, which is the act of worship, but how you got to the kitchen is where you could make the distinction that like separate people are worshiping separate gods, or a single person is worshiping separate pantheons of gods with simultaneity. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. And also the answer there is yes.
Well, of course, yes.
So we have evidence of, I forget exactly what they're called, but it's basically like a little sort of like home altar that you would sort of like make out of clay or plaster or sometimes carved wood, and it would just sort of like sit on your wall, like either hanging or against the floorboards or whatever, and it had spaces for 3 different deities, and each household kind of chose whatever deities it is that they wanted. This is something that was very common in Greek and Roman culture, and sort of going up into Slavic regions and going all the way up into the Vikings. And in this, we see directly alongside in like what is now like probably Serbia, I think. I don't remember exactly where they found this particular artifact, but like what is now Serbia, they found a household one that was Thor, and it was like Aphrodite, and then it was like Freya or something like that. Or maybe it was Thor, Apollo, and Freya. But either way, it was like 2 Norse deities and like one Greek or Roman deity. And then we see this sort of like interesting combination where some of these artifacts, these like wall altars have, you know, like all 3 from the same pantheon, but sometimes they have 3 from completely different pantheons, all 3 of them, you know. So there are some that have Janus, who is the Roman god of basically like the new year and the calendar, and then you have next to them like Thor, which is a very common deity to be worshipped in households. And then you have like a third deity from an entirely different pantheon. Sometimes this is Isis. Sometimes this is Horus. Sometimes this is a Babylonian deity. Sometimes this is something even further. And sometimes this is something that we kind of don't really know what it is, you know, because we don't have all of the information about back then because we don't have time machines. So like people did worship those deities in their house in the same time, and not just in like Norse regions, but also like in Roman areas too, because they were you know, worshiping like secret cults. So some secret cults were people that were a part of the secret cult of Isis, and then they were part of this cult, and then they were part of like a home thing, right?
Not cult, the negative connotation that Western ears hear. But but it's more like a club. Right? So, I mean, I think that the best way to really think about this question, I would say, is allegorical to music, right? Like, do you only listen to rock? Some people only rock, no other music, right? Top 20s rock, like nothing else. You know, top 10 rock, that kind of shit, right? But like, what if you listen to rock and hip hop? What if you listen to rock and reggae? Well, the thing is that, like, did you have, like, if you know, then this will feel crazy, but, like, you know what bluegrass is, but some people just don't.
Well, and also,
right?
Are you
so
listening...
if you don't know what bluegrass is, you obviously couldn't listen to bluegrass. Just the same, maybe you know what bluegrass is, but it's, like, for sure not your thing. Bluegrass is awesome. I'm not shitting on bluegrass, by the way. But like, it's not your thing. So you only listen to rock and, you know, rock and roll, you know, or whatever, right? Or like you listen to metal, but hip hop or whatever. So it's one of those things where, like, for the most part, either people chose not to worship concurrent differential deities because they didn't know they existed. But that's primarily an individual problem. That's not like a group. Like, everybody in Rome, you know, in the Roman Empire, didn't know, like, only one faith. That's crazy. They were like sending people out to adventure and conquer and shit. They ran into people who were like, yo, we worship this tree over here. And they're like, okay, very gangster. We have a tree guy? We've got a tree guy. Also, let's not do fighting because I'm tired and I need a goddamn nap. I've been walking for a while.
Also,
or whatever the
feed
fuck.
My army.
Yeah, exactly, right? Exactly. So obviously and the Romans is such a keen example of this, but I would argue like any expanding empire interacted with this in a profound way. Right? Which is like, as you expand, you're interacting with differential cultures, and those cultures like trickled backwards into and towards your capital as information. Like, look at the English who had secret Isis societies or secret Dionysian societies, right? Look at the English who picked up Chinese styles of worship, or the Portuguese who learned Japanese styles of worship, or the Japanese who learned Christianity early on, right? We're watching Shogun right now. Which the new one's very good. Watch the original, read the book. It's also very good. Very hard to find. But like, so I think that really like the benefit of the allegory of music with regard to this conversation is that like, obviously if you don't know of a type of music, then you don't know, right? But like, because you don't know, you never have the opportunity to listen to that. Like, if you've never listened to like The Who, that like Mongolian throat singing rock pop band, whatever you would call them, right? Like, if you've never heard Mongolian throat singing, like, obviously you don't listen to that. But if you have heard it, maybe you're like a metalhead, but you think that's dope. Because it is. Or maybe you're like into synth pop, but you think that's dope. Because it is. Right? So I think that that's kind of the best way to think about this, is that it's mostly limited by how much information people had, religious zealots notwithstanding.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's pretty accurate as far as I've been able to tell with the research that I've been able to do.
As far back as we have history and as far forward as we have history. The only limiting factor is whether or not you know me and we do a different thing.
Yeah. Well,
right?
I think
like, that's
it. I think that a good way to think about this is like the scene from the 1999 classic The Mummy, when Benny is trying.
When Benny is just,
and he's got all the necklaces.
Picking through those necklaces.
He's got all the religious things. He's doing Hebrew, all the prayers.
Speaking in, whatever and whatever. Yeah. Oh man. That
so like not to
scene.
say that like people were opportunistic or being like.
Well, but some worship is
trying to get ahead of it, but
it's not
is,
negative, right? Opportunism with regard to worship is not necessarily bad, right? Or asymmetric to morality, unless you're obviously doing it in a bad, amoral, or like evil way, right? But at the same time, I mean, like, look at it's like, I feel like if you're talking anciently, right, it's sort of one of those, like, look at who people could have known and what they could have known and then how they could have applied that.
Yeah.
Right? So that's kind of a little bit more difficult to, like, pin down as, like, Fred specifically worshipped these three deities. Like, that's too much to ask for.
Yeah, we kind of don't have that, but
well, I mean, but of course we don't. But we have that for the 1800s when like a bunch of real fancy English boys in London were starting like fucking secret societies and cults and shit.
But what we
doing like Eleusinian mysteries and shit.
Yeah, but we do have things that help to give that information.
To inform
right?
a truth that makes the most amount of sense reasonably, yeah.
We have like frescoes in Pompeii. We have receipts from people purchasing things from merchants. We have, artifacts that we found from people's homes. Yeah. We have
bill of lading, a very informative thing, especially like across the Silk Road or through the like ship trades, where you see like, why would conceptually speaking, right? Why would some guy in Rome be importing a bunch of Buddha statues or whatever, right? Yeah. It's clearly not because he's like, look at this crazy chubby guy, or crazy skinny guy, depending on which Buddha statues, right? Like, isn't this crazy? I don't know, hang your hats on it? Not the fuck at all,
We
bro.
also
the money
have-
is in the worship.
We also have mythos associated with it too, and I think that Dionysus is actually a really great deity to like talk about with this. I've been thinking about a lot about Dionysus lately, so this is like
You
funny
have
for
been
me.
talking about
Yeah.
Dionysus a bunch.
Stay tuned for a video where I talk about Dionysus style guide on my YouTube channel, Wife Jive. Shameless plug. But Dionysus is a really great choice for this because Dionysus was not only widely worshipped throughout the ancient Mediterranean, but he was also worshipped outside the Mediterranean. There are myths of Dionysus that indicate that are also based in some sort of real life things that we can line up, where there was a cult of Dionysus worshiping him in India. Like, that's pretty far. Like, they were already trading to there for silks and whatnot. So why not? Why wouldn't these people do that? Why wouldn't they worship him either solely, but in an entirely different place, or worship him alongside things?
Yeah.
And as far as the alongside things, we know that there were coins with Dionysus's likeness, and some of these coins compared him to other deities. So Dionysus was syncretized, which is sort of the third way that this stuff sort of manifests in this kind of conversation. And we kind of mentioned this before, is like, I have a deity and they're like this, and then yours is like this, and they're kind of the same person, even though they're like not. And then they sort of blend those
sort of
things over time.
explain it away with like linguistic barrier shit, or like culture stuff.
Yeah.
And then inevitably they just sort of like merge into like one guy. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So like when you go visit, like an example would be like if you go visit like the like northern Norse regions, and you're like, ah man, Thor's really clapping it up there, whatever you would say about that for thunder and lightning.
I mean, I guess
it's not that. It's not that, but I couldn't think of anything on the fly, right? But then you would like also travel down to like Roman shit, and you're like, Zeus is being a real dick up there, right? You know, because he's also clapping it up with the lightning, so, and the thunder and such. So like then it becomes sort of like locality based situation or whatever. And also when you kind of think about like if we sort of leave the mystic side and kind of go into that pragmatic, practical, like you're a trader with like a horse or a donkey or a camel or an ox or some shit, pulling like a cart full of shit to make money so you don't die.
You're a merchant.
Right, like a merchant, right? Yeah, that's why I said trader. Did I say trader?
You said trader, but also
like a trader.
like, is that
not
a
to
trader?
like betray.
Yeah, right.
No. Like you trade wares. D, not T. TRADER, not TRAITER.
I mean,
I don't know if that's how you spell either of those
part...
words. I said that with the kind of bold confidence of a madman.
Wait a minute, how did you spell it?
That's not important. Anyway.
Did you say an E in one of those?
Well, always is ER, so yes.
Oh, no, baby.
Yeah,
Not
trader.
always. Yeah, how about trader? The other trader.
Oh, you mean
stabby
traitor?
kind of trader. Don't even with me. Do not.
Yeah, I will. Listen,
but
the
also,
evenness of this, so level.
But also
the balance.
A trader as in a stabby trader would be like, that works too, because if they're gonna be a trader, they're probably gonna need to go somewhere else because they can't stay at home, and they're probably gonna bring their worship practices with them.
Yeah, you don't betray and then not bounce, right? You're like, I just committed this crime, and then went home and had some coffee, and they're like, okay, well, we're here, we're the police. You did a bad job coming back here, buddy. I'm not gonna try and tell you how to do your job. But
oh my god, you know what would be so fun is like an ancient old timey, like older than medieval, right? Ancient old timey,
yeah,
kind of like buddy cop series.
Listen, I'm gonna be way more specific than she's being. Specifically, a Roman buddy cop comedy.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Done.
I want what's the one with Jackie Chan and
You're thinking Shanghai Nights, aren't you?
No, I was thinking of the other one, the older one.
Oh, Rush Hour.
Rush Hour.
Okay.
I want
It was either Owen Wilson.
Shanghai Nights is so reasonable, dude, cuz they're like kind of the same but not. I I would do almost anything for this, right? I'm full meatloaf on this. Okay? I won't do that, but I'll do almost anything for this. Okay? I want Rush Hour fucking like Pompeii edition. Like Rush Hour
I'm sold.
Rush Hour Rome edition, bro. Like Capital Rome.
Yeah,
these two buddy cops. One of them is ex-legionnaire. The other is like a young upstart or whatever the fuck, right? Like in town, he's never been out to war, and they gotta like solve crimes, help the triumvirate or fucking whatever. Oh my god, this movie would be so much fun. Are you kidding? Oh, it would be so good. It would be
so great.
Honestly, the only people who have the balls to do it are Monty Python. Right? No hate to Hollywood.
You're probably right.
A fair amount of hate to Hollywood. But people aren't taking risks no more in film. We were just talking about this today. 80s, way funner time for movies.
It was
people were taking risks, right? Doing a lot of wild shit in film.
Yeah, a lot of cod pieces.
Fucking bold strategies, Cotton. But hey, listen, you know what? It activated like a bunch of motherfuckers. So
I
support.
I got feelings about a lot of these things.
But like, no, I think that when we apply like a bit of practicality to this, right? From the point of view of like commerce and travel and things like that, right? There's sort of like two distinct instances whereon we would see the like expansion of a specific deity's worship, right, into foreign lands, as it were, right? And the first is you are just some fucking asshole. You're a Londonian, right? Or you're from Rome, or you're from Paris. Who cares what time this happens in? Right? And then you like travel to, Egypt, or you travel into Africa, or you take a boat over to the North Americas, or you travel the Silk Road into Asia, and you like experience something. This is like sort of like I transcended on the playa kind of shit.
I went to Burning Man.
Right, I went to Burning Man and came back and changed my life. Or like I went to South America and did ayahuasca and it changed my life. Or like I went to Africa and like the Serengeti changed my life. Whatever the fuck. It happens now and it happened then. Right? Humans aren't that bloody different than we were back then, right? We just mostly have a lot more of this all faff. Right? But like, so like people who had traveled, even if you traveled for business or for war, right? You could see, like if you were a soldier, right? And you traveled over into Africa and you saw like Zulu warriors, right? Performing their rituals and then standing up, they're taking out 5 dudes to 1 kind of shit, right? You could see that and be like, well, listen, man, like I got to do what they're doing so I can survive these fucking fights. And you do it one time, right? Observation bias. You do it one time, not for serious. But like you saw them doing a jump up and down, spin around, pat on the head, whatever the fuck the thing is, whatever the ritual is, it doesn't matter, right? And you saw them do it, so you do it like a little bit like cash in your tent, nobody's watching, it's cool, and you survive like a particularly brutal battle, right? You're gonna come home and be like, listen, guys, like Zeus is tight, like Ares is tight and shit, but like also. Have you tried this shit where you spin around and you jump up and down, you pat on your head, Zulu shit? It's fucking fire. Saved me in that war back there, right? Or whatever. It can also be like, you gotta think, man. If you are like from a regular, like a Western European place, like a normal white person place, and you were to travel to like the like giant temples in India for the first time, and not like nowadays we're on an airplane, we got the internet, we know what this shit looks like. I mean, like, you and your boys are like, we're trying to make a buck. We're gonna fucking get a cart and a horse and spend 6 months traveling and try and like buy spices or some bullshit, right? And you get there, and the locals are like, oh, you gotta go like talk to the priest. He's got to give you the nomen patru so that way you can buy spices from us. And you're like, okay, cool. And they're like, oh, it's that big rock over there. And you're like, huh, okay. Thought that was a mountain. And then you get closer and you're like, holy shit, this is a building? What the fuck is happening in this country? And you're like blown away by it. You're going to talk about that. And because, the fish always gets bigger the more times you tell the story.
Yeah.
By the time you get back to fucking London Or the time you get back to Paris or fucking Berlin or whatever the fuck, right? You're over here just like, this shit, these fucking guys I bought this shit from, right? They're floating on air. Absolute magic, bro. They can carve mountains with their minds and shit, right? So you're like cranking it up to 11. So the next guy who hears anything about it, right? The mind looking for answers is going to hear that and be like, well, shit, I got to start studying this. And they piece together what little we have available on these faiths, and they start worshiping upon them, right? Because we're looking for answers. At the same time, the other side of it is like, we all know that like Christians sent like priests and shit all over to convert people to Christianity. It still happens, right? You think that Christians were like first like 9 Christians were like, hey guys, bold strategy. What if we send Phil here to go talk to that group over there, get them to join? And somebody was like, talk to people, get them to join. Yeah, shit, I can't believe nobody thought about that. Like, of course not. What are you talking about? Every religion does this, right? Every practice, every faith incentivizes a spread, right? So, like, obviously, if you were a practitioner of Norse deities at a time when it was rare or common, right? And you traveled to some far off land, when you showed up, you would be like, yo, that's crazy, these thunderstorms. You know, that's Thor. He's pretty tight though, right? And the locals are going to be like, I don't know what he's saying, but that seemed gangster. We should probably talk about this a little bit more. Or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So it becomes this thing where it like functionally makes sense for religions to spread and overlap. In fact, this, in my opinion, is the reason why syncretization is so effective. Yeah. Because like, if I show up and I'm like, yo, I don't know if you know about Zatlu, gotta be a gangster, but that's why I'm gangster. You should also worship this guy because he's gangster. Right? And I show up to a place where these motherfuckers are worshiping some other god who happens to be particularly rad or whatever. And I'm like, rad, gangster, basically the same fucking thing. We both know that. I mean, we don't because of the language barrier, but like we basically both know that. So like, yeah, same guy, bro. We may not have interacted. Also, our religions may have interacted 1,000 years ago, split off, developed, and then are recombining now, or retouching bases now. I mean, how many Greek gods or Roman deities are like, oh yeah, like they worship this guy, but like historically speaking, that shit comes from like a specific island, and like more specifically, like 5 ladies and 3 horses and a goat, or whatever the fuck. You know, so many Greek gods are like, oh yeah, I mean, but like Athena's actually. You know, because they got history deeper than the Greeks had history. Yeah, there's, you know, sort of thing.
Yeah, there's like a lot of that too, especially when you look at like when you look at the Mediterranean, when you look at Europe, because we have going back further than say like the Greeks and the Romans, and we've covered a few of these deities in the past on some deep dives, like Aphrodite is one of them, and if I remember right, Thor is one of them too, where these deities are like worshipped in antiquity, but they also sort of morphed out of older deities that are part of the Proto-Indo-European pantheon, meaning that like before the Greeks, before the Romans, before the Scythians, before the Norse, there were like deities that were largely worshipped in this area prior to all of that. And that goes back like a super long time, right?
Well, so some of these deities, I mean, if you sort of hallucinate this to its most extreme backwardsness, right? Which is obviously requires a great deal of assumptionization, right? Like, if you're gonna worship the sun, your word for the sun, it might be a different word than my word for the sun, but like our fucking planet still orbits the GD sun, so like it's the same guy.
Yeah.
But it's just like different vibes about it or whatever, right? And like, I think like there's got to be more distinction, the greater distance between two cultures for sure, right? You know, like kind of Mediterranean cultures are a little bit more of like a
They're a lot more of a melting
like a melting pot,
yeah,
like a mush up about that. But at the same time, right, like you still have that like, oh, like we got a sun guy, you got a sun guy. I mean, like when it's sort of bounced into each other and bounced off and like taken parts, right, or replicated things or other stuff like that. You know, I mean, like we still like the English built buildings in the Roman style or the Greek style way after those empires were gone, right? We still build buildings in ancient styles. There's like a fucking outdoorsman store that's built like a pyramid in like Wyoming or Tennessee or Texas or whatever the fuck, right? Just because it's like like for the reference TM, you know? So like we always have that, like that influence is like permanent once those interactions occur. So it results in the like deities sort of naturally syncretizing, but also like it allows for people to be like, oh, well, like let's say I'm particularly into storms, right? Then I'm gonna worship like the Norse god of storms. I'm gonna worship the Greek god of storms. I'm gonna worship the Marvel god of storms, storm. So like whatevs clev. You know what I mean? I think that the primary difference is that back then we don't have as much records. I don't even know that it wasn't as talked about, but like we just don't have the records for it. And it feels like, but nowadays is like the last 250 years, there's like a bunch of records of like a bunch of practitioners being like, we're doing Isis today, and then next week Dionysus, and then a week after that Thor and stuff, because of the nature of like, you know, the like mystery cults of the 1800s and like the like remodernization of Wiccan and its blending of cultures and ideals and things like that like nowadays it's more common feeling because we talk about it more. But that's only because we just don't have people from back then. You know, we can't reach back in time and like yank Fred the Roman up in and be like, what's up? And he's like, yeah, okay, terrifying. But also, have you heard about these three gods that I worship? Kind of energy. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and also like we live in a time that's like significantly more globalized. Like as time goes on, everything is
we
more
have
globalized.
the opportunity to do more things. Like, you know about Buddha, but like if you were like, you know, like 1800 BCE Greek guy, probably never heard of that guy.
Actually, no, that's not true. They probably did know
however
Buddha,
far back it needs to be for that to make sense. But you know what I mean.
They're not going to necessarily know about, like, they're not going to really know about deities from, like, the, like, Mayan or Aztec pantheon.
Yeah, that's a better example.
You know?
Yeah, different continent.
That's,
separated by water.
So, you know, there are definitely...
Yeah, they don't know about Quetzalcoatl.
Yeah, they don't know about that. Probably.
Fucking maybe, dude.
But also, like, we also kind of don't know. But, you know, we live in such a globalized society now that it feels like if we were to go back in time and do this stuff, it would be a lot more segmented. But really, it wouldn't be, because you still had, I mean, you didn't have people, you know, like traveling as far
as
and
many
as
people
much.
traveling as far.
Yeah, you didn't have as many people traveling as far or as much as we currently do, but we still had like a lot of people traveling primarily for war or for trade, or for like religious missions,
or to write down what they see.
Yeah,
like the travel vloggers. I mean, you said it at the beginning about like ancient Roman travel bloggers and shit like that, but like you gotta understand, bro. Like, think about this.
That's also what Ibn Fadlan was.
Yeah, exactly. If you were like, I'm gonna go on a travel, and you like pick up with this legion because like they're gonna keep you safe, and then you like pick up with this road with other travelers, and then you like walk this great distance, and you like show up, and a bunch of people are like burning an effigy of winter, and that's like some new shit to you. You're assuming you have the capacity to write it down, right? The technology or the skill. Right? You wrote it down. And if you didn't have that, you remembered that shit. So when you got home, you could be like, bros, you will not believe what I saw whilst I was traveling.
Yeah.
Right? So like, for sure these things would spread. I mean, like, just in the way that like today, algorithmically speaking, it's gonna feed you like new and novel shit to keep your attention, right? The like attention economy of novel data in like ancient Rome or ancient Egypt or bloody 1800s England or 1600s France was for sure travelers coming in with stories and being like, check this shit out, bro.
Yeah.
And if you can get a piece of like a scroll or like a book or like steal a bunch of ancient monuments, temple walls, and artifacts from a bunch of cultures, I'm looking directly at you, England, about this, right? You did that and brought it, one, because it made you a shitload of money, right? And two, because it's like new shit. It's the new hotness, bro. Right? It's the iPhone 27 or whatever the fuck. So like, of course people would have known, in my mind, a lot more about other cultures than we kind of give them credit for.
Yes, especially because, you know, a lot of people think that old-timey people were just dumb. But also,
which is a wild take.
One of the things that we haven't mentioned yet is that even now, where people are like physically from like a geolocation standpoint and who it is or what it is that they're worshiping, it's not like a hard line, right? You know, there's like a slow
your area
blending.
code doesn't make your god.
Yeah, right? It's not like, oh, across the street, we can't do that because that's an across the street deity.
Yeah.
So like
hold on, there are for sure places where they're like, Christians this side of the water.
Oh, yes.
Jews or pagans or Muslims or whatever on that side of the water.
Yeah, I mean,
hateful cunts notwithstanding is
I mean that kind of stuff
there.
like notwithstanding.
Yeah.
But like, you know, you would have like in one town they worship, we see this a lot in like when I'm looking at like Slavic deities, where in one town it's named deity is named Perchta, and in the next town over it's Birchta, and in the next town over it's like something slightly different, and it sort of like changes and morphs as things go on. So like 3 towns over, it's still pretty much the same deity, although the name may be different. You know, you're still seeing that, but also that third town over, maybe they're seeing things from 3 towns over the other side. So, you know, you have that sort of like blending, that like soft blending of things.
Yeah. Well,
that
you have
I think
to
makes
you
a
have
big
to think
difference
of sound like a scientist. You have to think of deities both as a particle and as a wave relative to locality.
We're doing
physics.
We're not doing science here.
We're doing physics. Get fuck. Okay, so like the particle of a deity.
I guess it's better than doing it as math.
You want to play this game? You want to make this numbers?
Not on camera, no.
Okay. I will make these deities algebra. No. So like the particle form of a deity. You
would too, you damn monster.
That's true, I will. The particle form of the deity is like Thor, god of thunder, big redhead guy, wide belt, tiny hammer. I mean, like a huge hammer, but like tiny shaft. It doesn't make it better sounding. You know what I fucking mean, right? Brother's a bit of a cunt. Wife has gold hair, right? You know, everybody knows who Thor is, but that's the particle. That's the moment of Thor, not like all of the other stuff, right? The wave of Thor is like, for some, Thor is a destroyer. For some, Thor is a storm, right? For a fisherman, Thor is a storm. Right? He's lightning in the skies at a distance to warn you of a thing. For a farmer, Thor may be relief because he's lightning that brings the rain. Right? If you're to be a bit comical, right? If you're in theater, Thor is a not super attractive, but like pretty okay looking wife. So bride, excuse me, you're right. So put on that dress, bruv. Right? Yeah. So like Thor is a bunch of different things, which is the waveform of Thor, and that's distinctly within regard to like the area in which he is worshipped, right?
Yeah.
I would argue that like if you were to sort of look at this just as like Christianity across the United States of America, right? you've got various forms of Christianity. You know, you got Lutheranism, you've got Mormonism, you've got Baptists, you've got Christians, you've got Catholics, you got them churches that got rock and roll guitars, you got mega churches, you got the churches where people are doing all sort of you know, where like the Jesus fever gets them and they're making a bunch of silly noises or whatever that's called. I'm not trying to disrespect that. I have no fucking clue what that's called. But like, you got that shit, right? And so like, that's all part of the waveform of Christianity across the United States, you know, and the Americas. But at the same time, even then, right? Like Our Father, my Lord's Prayer is going to physically sound different than if you're in Tennessee and you're doing the Lord's Prayer, because we got different accents. So our accent is on different things. The Lord's Prayer, as far as I am aware, the Lord's Prayer has changed like 3 fucking times in my lifetime. So like, fucking shit just drifts, bruv. Right? So like, so it's one of those things where it's like, it assists in syncretization. It helps in the understanding of how cultures can blend and people can worship multiple deities. And at the exact same time, it's part of that greater understanding of the fact that like modern global shrinkage, right? The like world is smaller, we're more connected. It only makes it easier to do these things. It's not that it invents these things, right? It's not like in fucking 1793 white people discovered Asian people. The world is far smaller than that, right? And we've always been far more connected than that, right? Again, like I said earlier at the beginning of the podcast, I think that this is mostly a function of the manner in which we are educated here in America, and potentially in the entirety of the West. We are educated in groupings, right? So you learn the Egypt stuff. And like, yeah, they mentioned that Cleopatra and some Roman asshole had some shit going on or whatever, right? But like, it's mostly Egypt stuff. And then you learn Roman stuff. And then you learn maybe England stuff, or France stuff, or Germany stuff, or China stuff, or Japan stuff. But like, it's all so segregated, makes it sound far more dramatic than it needs to be. But it's also segregated in the way that we talk about these things educationally, that we assume those separations must exist practically. And also, it doesn't help that the History Channel and a lot of talking heads seem to work off the situational awareness that like 500 years ago, humans were just dumber or weaker or something, and that's just horse shit.
Or aliens did it all.
And humans were not capable of it, which is just horse shit. But that's its own fucking different pub chat episode to talk about, right? So I don't get on that bloody high horse. But yeah, I think that like, obviously, yes and yes, for sure. But the nature of that, for sure, which we've just explored, is kind of what makes it more interesting. Mm-hmm. Right? And I would also argue, if we're going to sort of, before we close out the podcast, shift into modernity for a second, if you want to worship a Greek god, a Norse god, and a Chinese god, do it, man. There ain't nothing wrong with that. And the people who are saying there's something wrong with that, don't fucking listen to those people. Right?
Yeah.
Barriers don't help nobody.
Yeah. If you want to make sure that you're doing things in the right way, you know, just make sure that you're doing your research. Make sure that you're not taking the idea of the thing and sort of turning that into like a focus, and make sure that you're taking the thing itself into the focus. Look at your myths, be respectful, look at your information, like look at what other people are doing that also worship that same deity, you know, be respectful of other people's cultures and beliefs.
It's a balanced
structures.
Deity diet, right? If all you're eating is vegetables, you're not going to be as healthy. If all you're eating is meat, you're not going to be as healthy. If all you're eating is fruit or breads or dairy, you're not going to be as healthy. I don't know the new fucking food pyramid. It seems wild to me. I know the old one. I'm old. Shut up.
It's not a pyramid anymore. It's a plate.
I didn't even know that. So you know what? Fuck you guys. No. So
it's okay.
So,
we're gonna put all those deities into a little sandwich, and you can balance deity's diet. Arr.
Exactly. Right. But like if you give the correct amount of respect, right, and you treat it reasonably, then you can find a balance where you can like a bunch of deities from a bunch of different cultures can share the same load. And also, if you only want to worship deities from your culture, like I know we've been like very multicultural about this entire conversation, but if you're like, I only want to worship Norse deities, I don't want to worship any other deities, that's also fine.
Yeah. Like
nobody's forcing you to do shit. And if somebody is forcing you to do shit, that seems toxic. Don't talk to them. Red flag. Right?
Yeah.
So like, of course, like if you're not trying to be like scattered or all over the place or whatever term you want to use to worship like multiple deities from multiple different pantheons or whatever the fuck, that's fine.
Yeah.
Right? If you want to worship multiple deities from multiple different pantheons, that's equally fine. It's basically the same thing if we're going to get particularly squirrely about it, right? So, like, as long as you're being respectful and, like, chill and shit, that's all that really matters. Modernly. And I kind of just wanted to bring that up just to make sure that we're, like, all aware of the fact that, like, that's okay, right? I worship deities from many different pantheons, right? And I have no problem with that.
Yeah, I do too.
You know? So, like, whatever's clever, right? So, you know, be cool. Yeah. I guess is sort of the best way to end that. Like, be cool, and yes, they do.
Yeah.
All the time. And we always will. There will never be one singular faith across the land. That's a real silly thought that any person could possibly think. Humans are diverse. Diversity will always exist. Good luck, you smooth morons.
Yeah.
You won't win, but good luck. Yeah, I have hope that you'll fucking figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whatever. But yeah, I think that's kind of everything.
Probably more than covers it.
Okay, you know what? If you have more questions, comment below with those questions, and then you'll get lectured in the comments by me. Or by me, but Julie's gonna type it because I'm not as good at typing. Right?
Or we'll turn it into a whole episode
or a whole ass
podcast
about it. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, thank you for the question that came from one of our patrons. And if you'd like to join our Patreon, we're Nerd Jive over on Patreon. We have like a Discord, and we've got like Hangouts, and you have like more direct access to us, and there's like stuff over there and whatever. So like you can join that. Shout out to our patrons. I didn't write the list down, and my cell phone is currently recording this potentially. So shout out to you guys. Your name is on the thing. You're the best.
We do this episode without notes.
Yeah.
So
you're the best.
Thank you for helping us do what we do and better every time. We appreciate you.
Exactly.
And for those of you listening, we don't appreciate you. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
We appreciate you also.
No, we appreciate you. Hold on. We would appreciate you more if you liked, shared, and subscribed.
Look at you.
Subscribing. Yeah.
Doing a YouTube thing.
Get YouTube, guys. Anywho, I've been John Norgrove. This has been Julie Norgrove. This has been the Horn and Cauldron Podcast Pub Chat Edition.
Sir.
I was waiting for you to say your thing.
You did not wait.
Oh, I'm sorry. This has been the Horn
and Cauldron
Podcast. Pub Chat Edition. Now I'm just being echoed. That doesn't count. Stay count? Magical, folks.
Stay magical, folks.
No, you say a different thing.
Do I?
Oh, she forgot, guys.
No, I do.
We're going to end it here, though.
No, we're not. Don't forget, breathe in self-confidence and breathe out self-doubt.